Day 2. The blood had stopped pooling hours ago. Now it just caked in the dirt around her, black in the fading Afghan sunlight. 11 wounds. 11 separate points where metal had torn through flesh and found bone. Tessa Brandt lay wedged beneath a rock outcrop, her breathing shallow, her lips cracked and white. Her left hand clutched a broken radio. Her right hand still gripped a tourniquet half applied to someone else's leg before the world had tilted sideways. No sound came out, but the words were. No sound came out, but the words were tactical. Precise. The muscle memory of 8 years in the teams. Northeast Ridge, 300 meters, sniper nest, 2 tangos, effective range, 800. Nobody heard her. The radio had died yesterday, but Tessa Brandt kept talking anyway because that's what corpsmen do. They keep working until someone tells them to stop, and nobody had told her to stop yet. 72 hours earlier, the C-130 touched down at Bagram Air Base at 0430 hours, and Tessa was the last one off. She always was. She'd learned early that being first off a bird just meant being first to wait, and corpsmen didn't rush unless someone was bleeding. Nobody was bleeding yet. The air hit her like a furnace, even in the pre-dawn dark. March in Afghanistan. The Hindu Kush Mountains loomed to the north, shadows against shadows, and somewhere out there was SEAL Team 5, her new team. Her pack hit the tarmac with a thud. 65 pounds of medical supplies, personal gear, and the weight of a promise she'd made 12 years ago. The pack was regulation. The promise was not. A staff sergeant pointed toward a cluster of Humvees. "You Brandt?" "Yes, Sergeant." "Team's at the FOB, 30 clicks north. They're expecting you." She nodded, didn't say what she was thinking, which was that SEAL teams were never expecting anyone. They tolerated arrivals, sometimes. The ride north took 90 minutes on roads that barely qualified as roads. Tessa kept her hand on the grab handle and her eyes on the horizon, watching for the things you couldn't see until they killed you. IEDs, snipers, ambushes. The things her father had taught her to watch for back when watching was just a game. The forward operating base was a collection of HESCO barriers, an exhaustion ring by concertina wire, and the kind of silence that comes from too many people who've seen too much. The Humvee stopped outside a plywood structure marked medical. "They're in the briefing tent," the driver said. "Due east, can't miss it." She could miss it. She'd miss anything if it meant delaying this moment. But corpsmen didn't delay. She shouldered her pack and walked. The briefing tent smelled like gun oil and coffee and the particular staleness of men who'd been deployed too long. 6 SEALs sat around a tactical map, and they all looked up when she entered. 6 sets of eyes, 6 different versions of the same skepticism. The man at the head of the table stood, mid-40s, silver in his beard, lieutenant commander, rank on his collar. "You're Brandt." "Yes, sir." "Garrett Wade, team leader." He gestured around the table. "My boys. We had Chief Morrison for 3 years before he rotated out." "Good corpsman. You'll have work to do earning that spot." She nodded. "Understood, sir." The man to Wade's left leaned back in his chair. Petty officer first class by the rank, early 30s, dark hair, the look of someone who'd been let down before. "Shane Kowalski," he said. "You look about 100 pounds soaking wet, Doc. You handle a ruck march. I manage. Manage doesn't cut it when we're 12 clicks deep and someone needs carrying. Then I'll make sure nobody needs carrying, petty officer." His eyebrow went up. Not quite a smile, but close. The older man across the table spoke next. "Senior chief, late 30s, weathered in the way that came from 18 years of hard living. Henry Sullivan. Most people call me Hank." His voice was quiet, measured. "You've been with the teams before." 2 years with Team 3. 6 months with Team 7 before this." "Why the transfer?" Chief Morrison's spot opened. "I took it." Sullivan nodded slowly like he was filing that away for later. The youngest one spoke up, early 20s, seaman rank, eager eyes. "Connor Ellis, this is my first deployment with the teams." "Well, first deployment anywhere, actually." Tessa almost smiled, almost. "Stay close to Chief Sullivan Ellis. He'll keep you alive." Wade cleared his throat. "We've got a mission brief at 1400. Until then, get settled. Medical tent is yours. We run light, we run fast, and we don't leave people behind. That includes you, Brandt. You keep up or you stay home." "I'll keep up, sir." "We'll see." The medical tent was organized chaos. Supplies stacked in tactical efficiency, IV bags, tourniquets, combat gauze, chest seals, the tools of her trade laid out like a prayer. Tessa set her pack down and began unpacking. Her hands moved automatically. This part she knew. This part was safe. Medical scissors, hemostatic agents, nasopharyngeal airways. needle decompression kit. Each item had a place, and each place had a purpose. And if she focused on the organization, she didn't have to think about the looks in the briefing tent, the skepticism, the doubt, the unspoken question hanging in the air like cordite. Can she handle it? She'd handled it for 8 years. 73 lives saved, 0 casualties under her care. The numbers didn't lie even if her personnel file did, because her file didn't mention the rifle scores, the competitions, the national championship when she was 15, standing on a podium with a trophy bigger than her torso and her father's hand on her shoulder. Her file didn't mention that her father had been Master Sergeant James Brandt, United States Marine Corps, and that he'd taught her to shoot before he'd taught her to drive. It didn't mention the promise she'd made standing over his flag-draped coffin in October 2007. Never again, Mom. I'll heal. I won't fight. Tessa pushed the memory down and focused on the supplies. She was good at pushing things down. The ruck march started at 600 the next morning. 12 kilometers, full combat load, Afghan heat building like a thread. Tessa's pack weighed 65 pounds. The team's packs weighed 70 to 85. She was already at a disadvantage and everyone knew it. Wade set the pace, fast but sustainable, the kind of pace that separated pretenders from operators. The first 3 clicks were fine. Tessa kept position controlled. Her breathing ignored the burn in her shoulders. The 4th click, her left boot started rubbing wrong, blister forming. She didn't adjust her stride. The 5th click, Kowalski dropped back beside her. You good, Doc? Fine. You're limping. I'm adapting. He snorted. There's adapting and there's stubbornness. One keeps you alive, the other gets you killed. Which one am I? Don't know yet. He moved back to formation and Tessa kept walking. By click 8, the team had slowed. Not much, just enough that she noticed. Just enough that it felt like charity. She hated charity. By click 10, her vision was starting to blur at the edges. Heat, dehydration, the weight of the pack dragging at her spine. Wade called a halt at click 11. Water break, 5 minutes. The team dropped packs and drank. Tessa dropped her pack and stood there, swaying slightly, refusing to sit because sitting meant admitting weakness. Sullivan appeared beside her, quiet, observant. Drink, Doc. She drank. That blister's going to be a problem tomorrow if you don't address it tonight. I'll handle it. I know you will. But let me tell you something Morrison taught me. Corpsmen take care of everyone else. That's the job. But you can't do the job if you're broken. So take care of yourself first. That's not selfish. That's tactical. He walked away before she could respond. The last kilometer was the worst. Tessa's legs were shaking. Her shoulders screamed. The pack felt like it weighed 200 pounds. But she finished. 12 kilometers. Full load. She finished. Wade was waiting at the rally point. 23 minutes slower than Morrison's best time. Yes, sir. But you finished. I'll give you that. It wasn't praise, but it wasn't dismissal either. She'd take it. The next test came 2 days later during CQB drills. Close quarters battle, room clearing, the kind of work where hesitation got people killed and corpsmen were supposed to stay in the back. The kill house was a plywood maze. 4 rooms, multiple entry points, live ammunition. Wade briefed the team outside. Standard stack, Sullivan on point, Kowalski rear security. Ellis, you're with me. Foster, you've got overwatch from the north window. He glanced at Tessa. Brandt, you stay outside. This is operator work. Understood, sir. She didn't argue. Corpsmen didn't argue. They adapted. The team moved in. Gunfire cracked through the plywood walls. Controlled bursts. Precision shooting. Tessa stood outside, medical kit ready, watching the windows. 60 seconds in, Ellis came back out. Face pale, hands shaking. What happened? She asked. Nothing. I needed a second. She looked at him, really looked. His pupils were dilated, breathing too fast. Classic stress response. First time live firing in confined space. He nodded. It's different than the range. The sound bounces. Your brain thinks you're in more danger than you are. That's normal. Doesn't feel normal. It will. By the 10th iteration, it'll feel routine. That's when you have to be careful because routine makes you sloppy. He looked at her like she'd just said something profound. She'd just said something her father had told her when she was 14, clearing rooms in an abandoned barn outside Portland. Go back in, Ellis. You've got this. He went back in. When the drill ended, Wade pulled the team together for debrief. Good work. Solid entry. Sullivan, your timing on that door breach was perfect. Kowalski, watch your corners. Foster, excellent overwatch. He paused. Ellis, you hesitated on room 3. Cost us 2 seconds. What happened? Ellis glanced at Tessa. Got in my head, sir. Doc helped me sort it out. Wade looked at Tessa. She said nothing. Well, Wade said slowly, that's something. The real test came 3 days before the mission. Evening. The team was running maintenance on weapons. M4s broken down to components, cleaning rods, insolvent, and the smell of CLP in the air. Tessa was in the medical tent reorganizing supplies. Again. She'd reorganized them twice already, but idle hands meant idle thoughts, and idle thoughts led places she didn't want to go. Ellis appeared in the doorway. Doc, you got a second? Always, what's wrong? Nothing's wrong, Can I ask you something? Sure. He stepped inside hesitant. My leg's been bothering me, left shin. It's probably nothing but... Sit down, let me look. He sat, rolled up his pant leg. Tessa's fingers found the problem immediately. Tender spot on the anterior tibia, slight swelling. The kind of thing most people would ignore. How long has this hurt? Week or so. It's not bad, just noticed it more on the ruck march. She pressed gently. He winced. That's a stress reaction. Could be early stage of fracture. You keep loading it like you have been, it's going to break completely. It's fine, Doc, really, I can push through. You can push through until it snaps. Then you're a casualty and we're carrying you. Is that what you want? No, AM. Then you tell Commander Wade tonight, before mission brief tomorrow. He'll bench me. Yes. Doc, come on. This is my first real op. I can't... Ellis, her voice was quiet but firm. I've saved 73 lives in 8 years. You know how many I've saved by preventing injuries before they happen? I stopped counting at 200. You think I'm going to let you become number 74? Because you wanted to look tough. He stared at her. Tell Wade, or I will. He told Wade. Wade benched him. And the next morning during mission brief, Wade looked at Tessa with something that might have been respect. Good catch, Brant. Morrison never spotted Ellis's issue. You just saved us from carrying a man out of the mountains. Kowalski spoke up. Maybe she's not just 100 pounds of dead weight after all. 118, Tessa corrected. Someone laughed. Small victory, but she'd take it. The night before the mission, Tessa couldn't sleep. She lay in her rack staring at the tent ceiling, listening to the distant sound of generators and the occasional pop of gunfire from the ranges. In 14 hours, they'd be wheels up. Infiltration into Kunar province. High-value target. Rescue mission for 2 aid workers who'd been taken by a Taliban cell 3 weeks ago. Standard operation, low risk relatively speaking, relatively. Tessa's hand moved unconsciously to her right shoulder, found the scar there. Old injury, 12 years old now. She traced it with her fingers, feeling the ridge of tissue. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. You're bleeding. I'm fine, Dad. You're not fine. You're hit. Why didn't you call it? Because people were depending on me. That's not how this works, Katie. You call your hits. You stay honest. Otherwise, you get sloppy and sloppy gets people killed. She'd been 16. They'd been running drills with simunition. She'd taken a round to the shoulder close range and hadn't called it because calling it meant stopping and stopping meant failing. Her father had seen the welt forming through her shirt. He'd made her sit out the rest of the day, taught her the difference between toughness and stupidity. She'd learned the lesson. Eventually. Tessa rolled over, pulled her poncho liner up to her chin, and closed her eyes. Tomorrow was a medical mission. She'd treat wounds, stabilize casualties, keep the team alive. Tomorrow was what she'd promised her mother. Healing, not fighting, she'd keep that promise. Morning came too fast. The team assembled at 0530. Full combat load, M4S sidearms grenades. Sullivan carried the M249. Foster had the M24 sniper rifle slung across his back. Tessa had her medical ruck. 40 pounds of supplies, IV fluids, tourniquets, hemostatic agents, chest seals, everything she needed to keep people alive. She also had an M4, standard issue for all personnel. But hers was clean, freshly oiled, and hadn't been fired in 8 years except for annual qualifications. She intended to keep it that way. Wade gave the brief, short, efficient. 2 aid workers, American, taken 3 weeks ago by local Taliban cell. Intel suggests they're being held in a compound 15 clicks north of here. We infiltrate, we extract, we exfil. 12-hour window. Questions? Nobody had questions. Brant. Wade looked at her. You'll stay at the casualty collection point. 2 clicks from target. We bring wounded to you. You stabilize, we move. Clear. Clear, sir. You're good. Mount up. The Blackhawks were waiting. Tessa climbed in last, took a seat near the door. The helicopter lifted, and the FOB dropped away beneath them, and the mountains rose up around them like teeth. She checked her medical kit one more time. Everything in its place. She was ready for this. She'd been ready for 8 years. What she wasn't ready for, what she couldn't possibly be ready for, was what would happen 6 hours from now when the mission went wrong and someone would hand her a rifle and say, "You're the only one who can make this shot." But Tessa Brandt didn't know that yet. Right now, she was just a corpsman, a healer. And that was all she'd ever promised to be. The helicopter banked north toward the mountains, toward the mission, toward the moment that would change everything. And Tessa Brandt closed her eyes and tried not to think about the weight of the M4 against her leg. Tried not to remember her father's hands on her shoulders teaching her to breathe. Tried not to hear his voice, "Steady, Katie, let your heart decide when." She was a corpsman, that was all. That had to be enough. The helicopter dropped them at first light. 6 SEALs and 1 corpsman stepped onto Afghan soil, while the Black Hawk's rotors still beat the air into submission. The bird lifted, immediately disappearing south, and the silence that followed was the kind that made your ears ring. Wade hand signaled the formation. 2-column wedge, Sullivan on point, Foster with the M24 sniper rifle covering their 6. Tessa took her position in the middle, the safe spot, the protected spot, where corpsmen belonged. They moved north. The terrain was unforgiving. Rocky hills that turned to steep valleys, that turned to dried riverbeds that could hide anything. The kind of ground where every step required attention, where a twisted ankle could compromise a mission, where the earth itself felt hostile. 2 hours in, they reached the casualty collection point, a depression in the landscape, natural cover, 500 meters of clear sight lines in 3 directions. Tactically sound for what it was, a place to bring broken bodies. Wade pulled her aside. "Set up here. We'll be back in 4 hours, maybe 6. Radio check every 30 minutes. "Yes, sir." "If things go wrong, they won't." He looked at her, something unreadable in his expression. "They always do, Doc. Question is whether we're ready when they do." Then he was gone, and the team was gone, and Tessa was alone with her medical supplies and the weight of mountains watching her from every direction. She set up her aid station with the efficiency of 8 years' practice. IV stands assembled from tent poles. Trauma kit laid out in order of probable need. Tourniquets within arm's reach. Chest seals. Combat gauze. The instruments of her profession arranged like an altar. Then she waited. Radio check at 30 minutes. Wade's voice crackling but clear. "Lima 6, this is Alpha 1, status green. Copy Alpha 1, standing by. Radio check at 60 minutes. Sullivan this time. Lima 6 Alpha 2, approaching target area, no contact. Copy Alpha 2. At 90 minutes, the radio stayed silent. At 95 minutes, she heard the explosion. A deep crump that rolled across the valley like thunder. Except thunder didn't leave smoke rising in black columns against the sky. Her hand went to the radio. "Alpha 1, this is Lima 6. Confirm status." "Static. Alpha 1, confirm." Static, then Wade's voice tight with controlled urgency. "IED, we've got wounded. Kowalski's hit bad. We're coming to you." Tessa's hands were already moving. IV bag prepped. Tourniquets laid out. Hemostatic agents ready. "Understood. I'm ready." What she wasn't ready for was the sound of gunfire that followed. Distant but unmistakable. The flat crack of M4s answered by the deeper bark of AK-47s. "Contact multiple hostiles northeast ridge." More gunfire. Closer now. Wade's voice again, strain breaking through his professional calm. "We're pinned. Taking effective fire from elevated position. Need suppression on that ridge or we can't move." Tessa grabbed her own M4, not to shoot, just to be ready, just in case. The team came running 3 minutes later. Sullivan and Ellis carrying Kowalski between them. Wade and another SEAL she knew as Blake Foster laying down covering fire. The mountains echoed with violence. They dropped Kowalski at her feet. His left leg was wrong, the thigh. Arterial blood pulsing through his pants in rhythm with his heartbeat. Femoral artery. 90 seconds until unconsciousness without intervention. 3 minutes until death. Tessa's training took over. Tourniquet high and tight on the thigh, above the wound, cutting off blood flow to the entire leg. Kowalski screamed. She ignored him. "Doc," Sullivan started. "Get back to your positions. I've got him." They hesitated. "Now." They moved. Tessa's hands worked with mechanical precision. Tourniquets secured, wound packed with combat gauze. Pressure applied. IV started in his good arm fluids running. Kowalski's breathing was rapid and shallow. Shock setting in. "Stay with me, Kowalski. You're not dying today." "Feels like I might, Doc." I don't lose patience. You're not going to be my first. Gunfire intensified. She could hear Wade shouting coordinates, trying to direct fire onto the enemy position. Then Foster's voice, desperate in a way that made her stomach drop. I'm hit. Shoulder can't hold the rifle, Wade cursed. Anyone got eyes on that sniper? Northeast Ridge, 800 meters. I need someone on that M24. Foster's down. Someone else then? Silence on the radio, the kind of silence that meant no one else was qualified. No one else had the training. No one else could make an 800-meter shot under pressure. Tessa's hands stilled on Kowalski's wound. 800 meters. She hadn't fired a rifle in 10 years. Not since her father's funeral. Not since the promise. But she knew how. Muscle memory didn't forget even when you wanted it to. Doc, what are you doing? Kowalski's voice was weak but aware. Saving your life and theirs. She grabbed Foster's M24 where he'd dropped it. 28 pounds of precision engineering. Loophole scope. .300 Winchester Magnum. The weight familiar in a way that made her chest tight. Sullivan appeared beside her. Doc, you can't cover Kowalski. Keep pressure on that wound. He loses that tourniquet, he's dead in 2 minutes. You're a corpsman. Right now, I'm whoever they need me to be. She moved to a position with clear sight lines to the ridge. Dropped prone. The rocky ground bit into her elbows. The M24 stock found her shoulder like it had never left. Through the scope, she could see the enemy position. Sandbags, a rifle barrel. Movement, 847 meters. The rangefinder confirmed it. Her father's voice in her head, clear as if he were lying beside her. Breathe, Katie. Let your heart decide when. She inhaled. 4 seconds. Held. 7 seconds. Exhaled. 8 seconds. Her heart rate slowed. 60 beats per minute. 55. 50. Wind from the east. Maybe 3 miles per hour. She adjusted. Elevation. The target was higher. She adjusted. Temperature. Humidity. Barometric pressure. Her brain calculated automatically, a skill beaten into muscle memory through 10,000 practice rounds. Her finger found the trigger. Not pulling, squeezing. The difference between amateurs and professionals. Between heartbeats, she squeezed. The rifle bucked. The shot cracked across the valley. Through the scope, she saw the bullet impact. Rock. 2 feet left of target. She'd missed. 10 years since her last shot. 10 years of rust. 10 years of promises kept. And she'd missed. Wade's voice on the radio. Negative impact. Sniper still effective. Tessa's hands were shaking. Not from fear. From the realization of what she'd almost done. What she was about to do. Break the promise. Become what she'd sworn she'd never be. A killer. But Sullivan was pinned. Wade was pinned. 2 men she'd shared meals with, trained with, trusted. And they were going to die if she didn't take this shot. Her father's voice again. Gentler this time. You're not choosing who to be, Katie. You're choosing who to save. She cycled the bolt. Chambered another round. This time her hands were steady. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. Wind. Elevation. Distance. Her heart beating slow and sure. Between beats she squeezed. The rifle spoke. Through the scope she watched the enemy sniper jerk backward. Saw him fall. 847 meters. Center mass. Dead. For 3 seconds nobody moved. Then Wade's voice shocked into something almost like awe. Confirmed kill. Sniper down. What the hell, Doc? Tessa didn't answer. She was already moving back to Kowalski, setting the rifle aside, returning to the work she understood. Healing. Sullivan stared at her like he'd never seen her before. Doc, that shot. Is Kowalski stable? He's stable, but then help me get him ready for evac. We're moving in 5 minutes. Doc, 5 minutes, Chief, move. He moved, but the question hung in the air, unspoken but deafening. Who the hell are you? The extraction was chaos managed through training. Wade called for immediate exfil. The Black Hawk came in hot rotors screaming, and they loaded Kowalski aboard with hands that had done this 100 times before. Foster climbed in under his own power shoulder, bleeding, but not critical. The bird lifted. The team stood in the rotor wash, watching it disappear south toward Bagram, and safety and surgeons who could do what Tessa couldn't do in a depression in the Afghan mountains. When the sound of the helicopter faded, Wade turned to her. My tent, now. It wasn't a request. The walk back to the casualty collection point took 4 minutes. Nobody spoke. Tessa could feel their eyes on her back. Sullivan packed up her medical gear in silence. The IV stands, the unused equipment, the instruments of healing that she'd abandoned for a rifle. Wade waited until the gear was secured. Then he looked at her with an expression that was part confusion, part calculation, part something else she couldn't identify. 847 meters. First shot missed, second shot killed. Yes, sir. You're a corpsman. Yes, sir. Corpsmen don't shoot like that. Hell, most of my SEALs don't shoot like that. She said nothing. So I'll ask one time and I want a straight answer. Where did you learn to shoot? Tessa looked at him, at Sullivan standing nearby, at the mountains that held too many secrets to count. My father. Your father was a Marine. Master Sergeant James Brandt, Force Recon, served 22 years before he was killed in Somalia. October 2007. Wade's expression shifted. Recognition, respect. Black Hawk Down Memorial, I know the name. Yes, sir. That doesn't explain an 800-meter shot under pressure. He taught me to shoot when I was 12. By the time I was 15, I was winning National Youth Precision Rifle Championships. By 16, I was competing at the adult level. Sullivan spoke up quiet. That's professional level shooting. Yes. Wade crossed his arms. Why didn't this show up in your file? Because it's not relevant to my job, sir. I'm a corpsman. I heal. I don't fight. You fought today. Today was an exception. Why when the question hung between them? Why? Why break 10 years of discipline? Why violate a promise made over her father's grave? Why become the thing she'd sworn never to be? Because you needed me to. Wade studied her for a long moment. That's not the whole answer. It's the only one I have right now, sir. He glanced at Sullivan, then back to her. We'll discuss this later. Right now, we still have a mission. Those aid workers are still in that compound, and I'm down 2 shooters. Can you still operate? I'm a corpsman, sir. I can always operate. That's not what I'm asking. Can you shoot again if we need you to? She thought about the promise, about her mother's face when she'd made it, about the weight of her father's flag in her hands. If it's necessary to save lives, yes, sir. Good, because it might be necessary. The mission resumed 6 hours later, after Foster and Kowalski were confirmed stable at Bagram. The team was down to 5: Wade, Sullivan, Ellis, Blake, and Tessa. Undermanned, but still operational. The target compound sat in a valley 3 clicks north. Intel suggested the aid workers were being held in the main building. Taliban forces estimated at 15 to 20. The plan was simple. Infiltrate at dusk, neutralize resistance, extract the hostages, exfil before dawn. Simple plans never survived contact. They moved in under cover of darkness. Night vision turning the world green and grainy. Tessa carried her medical ruck and her M4, but the M24 was strapped across Sullivan's back, just in case. The approach took 90 minutes. Slow, careful, every step evaluated for noise, for visibility, for the 1,000 small things that could compromise an operation. They reached the compound perimeter at 21:30 hours. Wade hand-signaled the positions. Sullivan and Blake to the north entrance. Ellis covering the east. Wade taking point on the main door. Tessa was supposed to stay back. Overwatch position, medical support. Not combat, but plans as mentioned never survived contact. The explosion came from the west side of the compound. Not one of theirs. Enemy initiated. Someone had spotted them. Automatic fire raked their position. Muzzle flashes in the darkness. Voices shouting in Pashto. Wade's voice on the radio calm despite the chaos. Contact west, multiple hostiles. Ellis collapsed to north position. Ellis moved. Halfway across the open ground, he went down. Not from gunfire, just fell, clutching his neck. Shrapnel. Tessa could see it even from 50 meters away. The way he was holding the wound. The way his body was positioned. Jugular area. If the shrapnel had hit the external jugular, he had minutes. If it had hit the carotid, he had seconds. She was moving before Wade could order her to stay. Crossing open ground under fire was stupidity, but letting Ellis bleed out was worse. She reached him in 12 seconds that felt like 12 hours. Let me see. His hand came away bloody. The shrapnel had opened a 3-inch gash along the right side of his neck. Blood pulsing but not arterial. External jugular compromise. Survivable if treated immediately. Lie still. She packed the wound with combat gauze. Applied pressure. The bleeding slowed. Doc, you shouldn't be here. Quiet. You're going to be fine. Gunfire intensified. She could hear Wade and Sullivan engaging targets, the controlled bursts of disciplined shooters. Then Sullivan's voice tight with urgency. Sniper 1,100 meters mobile target. Mobile. That meant vehicle. Motorcycle probably. The Taliban's preferred platform for mobile shooters. I can't get a lock targets moving too fast. Wade cursed. Blake, can you take it? Negative, no clear line of sight from my position. The motorcycle-mounted sniper fired. The round impacted near Wade's position close enough that Tessa heard him grunt. "Someone kill that shooter or we're all dead." Tessa's hands kept pressure on Ellis's wound while her eyes tracked the movement in the distance. Through the darkness, aided by moonlight, she could see it. A motorcycle. Rider and shooter, weaving between cover, 1,100 meters and moving. An impossible shot. Her father had made her practice impossible shots. She looked down at Ellis. "Keep pressure here. Don't move. I'll be back." "Doc, what?" She was already moving. Sullivan had the M24. She found him pinned behind a low wall trying to track the motorcycle and failing. "Give me the rifle." He looked at her like she'd lost her mind. "Doc, that's a moving target at over 1,000 meters." "I know what it is. Give me the rifle." He handed it over. Tessa dropped prone, found the target through the scope. Motorcycle. 2 men. Speed approximately 40 kilometers per hour. Distance 1,134 meters. Wind 5 miles per hour quartering from the northeast. Temperature dropped 15 degrees since earlier. She'd have to lead the target. Aim where it would be, not where it was. Her father's voice teaching her this exact shot when she was 16. Moving targets are about prediction, not reaction. See where they're going. Put the bullet there. Let them meet it. She calculated. Wind, distance, speed, trajectory. Inhale, hold, exhale. The motorcycle would be there in 4 seconds. Between heartbeats, she fired. The bullet crossed 1,134 meters in 1.3 seconds. The motorcycle was exactly where she'd predicted it would be. The shooter pitched backward off the bike. The vehicle wobbled, crashed, slid across gravel in a spray of sparks. Silence from the radio. Then Wade's voice barely controlled. "Confirmed kill. Mobile sniper down. Doc, what the actual hell?" Tessa handed the rifle back to Sullivan and returned to Ellis. "Stay still, I need to get an IV started." Sullivan stared at her. That was an impossible shot. It was a necessary shot. There's a difference." She worked on Ellis with hands that didn't shake. 4 started. Wound stabilized. Blood loss minimal now. Behind her, she could hear the team securing the compound. The sharp commands. The controlled breaches. The sound of hostages being located and secured. The mission succeeded. 2 aid workers extracted safely. 0 friendly casualties. 1 enemy sniper killed at over 1,100 meters while moving. By a corpsman who'd promised never to fight. The exfil helicopter came at 0430 hours. Tessa helped load Ellis aboard, made sure his IV was secure, his vitals stable. Wade pulled her aside before she could board. "That shot, the moving target." "Yes, sir." "That wasn't luck. The first shot, maybe I could believe Russ' bad timing. But that second shot, that was skill. Professional level skill." She nodded. "How many competitions did you win?" 17 national, 4 international. "I stopped competing when my father died." "Why behaving?" "Because I promised my mother I would never use those skills in combat, that I would heal, not kill." "You broke that promise today, twice." "Yes, sir." "Regret it." She thought about Kowalski stable now in a hospital bed. About Ellis, whose neck she'd packed with gauze while under fire. About Sullivan and Wade and the 2 aid workers who would see their families again. "No, sir, I don't." Wade nodded slowly. "Good, because we're going to need you again. This deployment has 3 months left, and you just proved you're more than a corpsman. You're an asset." "With respect, sir, I am a corpsman. That's my job. That's who I am." "Maybe, but you're also a sniper, and pretending you're not doesn't change reality." He walked away, leaving her standing in the rotor wash with the weight of 2 broken promises, and the knowledge that she'd saved 5 lives by becoming exactly what she'd sworn never to be. Sullivan appeared beside her. "For what it's worth, Doc, I'm glad you were lying about not being able to shoot." "I wasn't lying, I just wasn't telling the whole truth." "Is there a difference?" "I'm still figuring that out, Chief." The helicopter lifted. The compound fell away below them. Somewhere in the darkness, her father's voice whispered something she couldn't quite hear. Maybe pride. Maybe forgiveness. Maybe just the wind. Tessa closed her eyes and tried not to think about how natural the M24 had felt in her hands. How right. How terrifyingly easy it had been to become what she'd run from for 10 years. A warrior, not just a healer, both. And that realization scared her more than any enemy fire ever could. 24 hours after the moving target shot, command sent new orders. High-value target. Taliban commander responsible for 3 IED attacks on coalition forces. Intelligence suggested he was meeting with foreign operatives in a compound 12 kilometers northwest of their position. Time-sensitive, 24-hour window. Wade gathered the team at dawn. This one's bigger than the last. Estimated 15 to 20 hostiles. Command wants this commander alive if possible and dead if necessary. He looked around the assembled SEALs. Kowalski was back from Bagram, legs still healing, but operational. Foster's shoulder was taped and functional, though he moved it gingerly. Ellis wore a bandage on his neck, but had refused medical evacuation. Then Wade's eyes settled on Tessa. Brant, you're combat effective. You're with us on this one. The tent went quiet. Not as medical support, stationed at a casualty collection point, not watching from safety while others fought. As an operator. Sir. Her voice was steady, but something inside her shifted like tectonic plates finding new alignment. You've proven you can shoot. You've proven you can maintain composure under fire. We're undermanned, and you're the best marksman we have after Foster. I need you in the assault element. Sullivan spoke up. Commander, she's still a corpsman. She's also a sniper who can hit moving targets at 1,100 meters. Right now, I need both skill sets forward. Wade's tone left no room for argument. Tessa nodded once. Understood, sir. Kowalski caught her eye across the tent. Something had changed in how he looked at her. The skepticism was gone, replaced by the kind of respect operators reserve for people who'd proven themselves in blood. The briefing continued. Satellite imagery showed 3 buildings within a walled compound. Guard towers at the northeast and southwest corners. Estimated 18 hostiles, though that number could flux higher. Tessa absorbed the tactical details while a voice in the back of her mind whispered that she'd crossed a threshold she couldn't uncross. She wasn't just a corpsman who happened to shoot anymore. She was becoming something else. Something her father would have recognized. Something her mother would struggle to accept. They left at 1400 hours. Full combat load. Tessa carried her medical ruck, 40 pounds of trauma supplies she'd reorganized 3 times that morning, her M4 and the weight of promises made and broken. The movement to target took 4 hours through terrain that seemed designed to kill the careless. Ravines that could hide entire squads. Ridge lines that offered perfect ambush positions. Ground that punished every misstep. By 1800 hours, they'd reached their final assault position 500 meters from the target. The compound sat in a depression like a wound in the earth. Mud brick walls the color of dried blood. 3 buildings arranged around a central courtyard. The guard towers were occupied. Tessa could see movement through her rifle scope. Wade positioned the team with the precision of a surgeon. Sullivan and Foster on the north wall their breach point. Ellis covering the east approach, watching for reinforcements. Kowalski on the west, despite his healing leg because Kowalski was too stubborn to accept a rear position. Wade would take point through the breach, and Tessa was assigned to rear security. 50 meters back from the assault element, covering their 6 watching for the flanking attack that could turn a successful breach into a massacre. Not frontline, but not safe either. The breach began at 1830 hours time to evening prayers, when attention might be divided when the human mind's natural circadian dip made reactions slower by critical milliseconds. Breaching charges on the north wall. The explosion was precisely controlled violence enough to create an entry point, not so much that it brought the whole structure down. The team poured through the gap like water finding cracks. Tessa held her position, M4 raised, scanning the approaches to their rear. The firefight inside the compound was intense but organized. The controlled 3-round bursts of M4s answered by the less disciplined automatic fire of AK-47s. Shouted commands in English, screams in Pashto, the universal language of violence translating across cultures. 90 seconds and Wade's voice crackled over the radio. Building 1 secure, 3 EKIA, moving to Building 2. Enemy killed in action. The clinical terminology that made death sound like accounting. Tessa's sector remained quiet. Nothing moving in her field of fire. Just empty ground and shadows lengthening in the fading light. She allowed herself to think that maybe this one would be clean. Fast insertion, surgical extraction, minimal casualties. That thought died 3 seconds later. The RPG team materialized from the west like ghosts taking solid form. 3 Taliban fighters emerging from a depression in the landscape that Tessa hadn't cleared because her assignment was rear security, not full perimeter reconnaissance. 1 carried the launcher, the other 2 provided security. They were 70 meters away when she saw them. The RPG was already shouldered, already aimed, not at her position. At the breach point where her team was funneling through the wall, Tessa's training took over. Target the greatest threat first, the launcher. She fired, 3-round burst, center mass on the RPG gunner. The rounds impacted with the wet sound of bullets finding flesh. He went down, legs folding, but his finger had already found the trigger in that final spasm of dying nerves. The rocket-propelled grenade launched. The dying man's aim had shifted as he fell, not toward the compound, toward Tessa. She tried to move, tried to get behind the rocky outcrop to her left. But 70 meters gives you maybe 2 seconds when high explosives are involved. Not enough time. The RPG hit the wall 6 feet to her left. The explosion was pressure and heat and violence translated into physics. The concussive wave picked her up like a child's toy and threw her into rocks that had no sympathy for human fragility. The world became ringing silence in the taste of copper and dirt. When her hearing started to return muffled like listening underwater, someone was screaming. It took her several seconds to realize it wasn't her. It was the second Taliban fighter, the one she hadn't shot yet. The one who'd been standing too close to his companion when the bullets hit. Her M4 was gone. Blown somewhere in the blast, probably broken, definitely out of reach. But her sidearm was still holstered. Tessa drew her Beretta M9 with hands that shook from blast concussion, not fear. Aimed through vision that wanted to double. Fired twice. The screaming stopped. She tried to stand. Her left leg didn't respond correctly. Looking down, she understood why. Shrapnel. Multiple fragments embedded in her left thigh. Blood soaking through her uniform and spreading darkness. Her right thigh had taken damage too. She could see the torn fabric, the wounds beneath. She began counting the wounds she could see. Left thigh. 2 distinct pieces of shrapnel, both buried deep in muscle. Right thigh. 1 fragment smaller but jagged. Left shoulder. 1 piece that had torn through her uniform and lodged in the deltoid. Right side below the ribs. A fragment that hurt to breathe around. Lower abdomen. Superficial but bleeding. Left forearm. A long gash from a fragment that had tumbled rather than penetrating clean. Right bicep. Deep penetration that compromised muscle function. Her neck. She touched it gingerly. A graze along the right side, maybe 2 centimeters from her carotid artery. 2 centimeters between wounded and dead. She couldn't see her back, but she could feel the pain there. Sharp. Distinct. At least 2 more fragments. 11 wounds total. And inside the compound, the firefight was still active. She could hear it through the ringing in her ears. Tessa's training asserted itself over pain and shock and the growing certainty that she'd been hurt very badly. Assessment. Multiple penetrating trauma. Blood loss moderate to severe. Mobility compromised but functional with effort. Immediate action required. Apply tourniquets where applicable. Maintain operational effectiveness. Do not compromise the mission. She pulled a cat tourniquet from her medical kit with hands that wanted to shake, but didn't because she wouldn't allow them to. Applied it high and tight to her left thigh above the worst damage. The pain was extraordinary. She made no sound. Corman didn't scream. Screaming meant the team would divert attention to her. Diverted attention meant vulnerability. Vulnerability meant casualties. She would not be responsible for casualties. Not ever. Not while she could still function. The radio crackled. Wade's voice still controlled despite the stress she could hear underneath. Rear security confirmed status. Did Tessa keyed her mic? Her voice came out steady, professional. Years of training overriding the screaming from her nervous system. Rear secure, engaged 3 hostiles. Threats neutralized. Copy that, target acquired. Beginning exfil in 2 minutes. Understood. She didn't mention the wounds. Didn't mention the blood pooling beneath her. Didn't mention that standing upright was requiring more concentration than any action she'd ever taken. 2 minutes became 5. The team emerged from the compound in tactical formation. Wade in the front, one hand on the collar of a zip-tied Taliban commander, the other on his M4. Sullivan and Foster providing cover, their weapons tracking potential threats. Ellis moving carefully, one hand pressed to his side. Kowalski brought up the rear, still favoring his healing leg, but operational. They reached Tessa's position. Wade's eyes swept over her in the automatic assessment of a team leader checking his people. You good, Brandt? Operational, sir. He looked closer, saw the torn uniform, the blood, the tourniquet on her thigh. You're hit. Ellis took shrapnel in the compound. His wound takes priority. Wade opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. He'd learned by now that arguing with Tessa Brandt about medical priorities was futile. Handle it. We exfil in 3 minutes. Tessa moved toward Ellis. Each step sent fresh agony through her leg, but pain was just information. You acknowledged it. You didn't let it control you. Ellis had taken shrapnel to his right side during the compound breach. The fragment had torn through his uniform and embedded in the oblique muscle, missing vital organs, but causing steady blood loss. Tessa knelt beside him. The movement made her vision gray at the edges. Let me see. He pulled his hand away. The wound was deep but not immediately life-threatening. She packed it with combat gauze, her hands moving through the familiar motions. Started an IV in his left arm. Administered morphine for pain management. "Doc, you're bleeding," Ellis said, his eyes tracking the blood dripping from her uniform onto the ground. "I'm functional." "You're not." "Stay still, Ellis. Don't talk. Conserve energy." Behind her, Wade was on the radio requesting immediate exfil. The response made Tessa's stomach drop even through the growing fog of blood loss. Negative on immediate exfil. Sandstorm incoming from the west. ETA 20 minutes. All aircraft grounded until it passes. "How long?" Wade's voice was tight. "Weather estimates 12 to 18 hours minimum. Could be longer." Wade cursed with the creativity of a man who'd served 20 years. Then he looked at his team. Two visibly wounded, though he didn't yet understand how badly one of them was hurt. "Find us a position. We're going to ground until this storm clears." They found a defensible location 600 meters from the compound. Natural rock formations provided cover from 3 directions. Good sight lines to detect approaching threats. Tactically sound for a temporary patrol base. Tessa set up her casualty collection point with hands that functioned on autopilot while her mind started to drift in ways that worried her. She assessed Ellis first. His wound was stable. The combat gauze had controlled the bleeding. The IV was running clear. He'd be fine, but Kowalski's leg wound from the previous mission had reopened during the compound assault. Fresh blood seeped through the bandage. "Kowalski, sit down." "I'm fine, Doc." "Sit down." He sat. She cut away the old bandage. The wound had torn open along 3 centimeters of the original incision line. Not life-threatening, but it needed cleaning and redressing to prevent infection in this environment. She cleaned it with betadine, applied fresh combat gauze, wrapped it in sterile bandages, administered oral antibiotics from her kit. "Keep weight off it when possible," she told him. "Yes, ma'am." Sullivan appeared at her shoulder. "Doc, you need to let someone look at your wounds." "After I finish the casualty assessment." "Doc." "After." Foster had burns on both hands from a flashbang that had detonated closer than intended during the breach. Second-degree burns across the palms and fingers. Tessa treated them with Silvadene cream from her medical ruck, wrapped them in sterile gauze. The burns would hurt, but they wouldn't prevent him from functioning. Wade had taken a small fragment to his left shoulder during the extraction. Minor compared to the others, but metal and flesh was metal and flesh, and it needed to come out. She worked on him last. "Brent," Wade said quietly while she extracted the fragment with forceps. "You're bleeding through your uniform in multiple places." "I'm aware, sir." "You need treatment." "Everyone else is stable. I'll address my wounds after." "That's an order, Doc." "With respect, sir, my medical judgment supersedes command authority in matters of triage protocol. I've assessed my injuries as non-critical. The others required immediate intervention." He stared at her, something in his eyes that might have been anger or might have been awe. "You're the most stubborn person I've ever met." "I'm thorough, sir." She finished extracting the fragment, cleaned the wound channel, applied a field dressing. "Done. Change the dressing in 12 hours. Watch for signs of infection." She stood up. The world tilted sideways. Sullivan caught her before she hit the ground, his hands surprisingly gentle for someone his size. "Doc." "I'm fine, just stood too fast." But she wasn't fine. The blood loss had reached critical levels. Her body was shutting down in stages, prioritizing core functions over peripheral ones, like maintaining consciousness and keeping her upright. Sullivan lowered her carefully to the ground. His hands found the tourniquet on her thigh, checked its tightness. "Jesus Christ, Doc. How long have you been hit?" "Since the RPG, approximately 90 minutes. "You've been working for 90 minutes with..." He started cutting away her uniform, exposing the wounds. His face went pale. "Wade, get over here!" Wade was beside them in seconds. Ellis struggled to sit up. Kowalski limped over, the whole team converging. "Why didn't you say something?" Wade's voice was strained in a way she'd never heard before. "You needed a corpsman. I'm the corpsman." "You needed a corpsman. Everyone else needed one more." Sullivan was cataloging her wounds, now his medic training basic compared to hers, but sufficient for assessment taking over. Left thigh 2 deep fragments. Right thigh 1, left shoulder 1, right side below ribs 1, lower abdomen superficial but bleeding, left forearm gash, right bicep deep penetration, neck graze close to carotid. He carefully rolled her to check her back. 2 more into the back, upper left and lower right. He looked at Wade. "That's 11 wounds, sir." 11, and she's been working on us for 90 minutes. Wade's face had gone from pale to gray. 11 wounds and you didn't make a sound. You treated 4 people while you were dying. 3, Tessa corrected. Her voice was getting weaker despite her best efforts. Ellis Kowalski and you. Foster's burns are painful but not acute trauma requiring immediate intervention. Doc, that's not the point. The point is everyone's stable now. Mission successful. Her vision was starting to tunnel, the edges of the world going soft and dark like an old photograph fading. Sullivan's voice urgent now. She's going into shock. Blood pressure's dropping. Wade grabbed the radio. Any update on that exfil? Static, then the voice of the air operations controller. Negative Alpha 1. Storms intensified, 18 to 48 hours until we can get birds in the air. 48 hours. Tessa had maybe 6. Wade looked at his team. Men who'd faced impossible odds before 4. Men who'd learned to operate in the space between alive and dead. We keep her alive, whatever it takes. Do you understand me? Yes, sir. Sullivan was already moving with the controlled urgency of someone who understood exactly how bad this was. I need 2 more IF lines. Ellis, get the fluids from Brant's Ruck. Kowalski, emergency blankets for shock management. Foster, help me apply pressure dressings to the worst bleeds. The team moved like a machine, each person executing their role with precision. Ellis brought the IV bags despite his own wound. Sullivan got 2 more lines started, one in each of Tessa's arms, and hung the bags from improvised stands made from tent poles. Kowalski spread emergency blankets over her. The metallic fabric crinkled like accusation. Foster, working despite his burned hands, helped Sullivan apply pressure dressings to the wounds that were bleeding most severely. Wade knelt beside Tessa's head. Stay with us, Brant. That's an order. She tried to smile. Her lips felt numb. Can't disobey. Direct orders, sir. Damn right you can't. The hours blurred together like watercolors running in rain. Sullivan monitoring her vitals every 15 minutes, checking the tourniquets, adjusting the IV flow rates, doing the work she would normally do for others. Ellis talking to her when consciousness started to slip, telling stories about his family in Ohio, his mother who sent care packages, his younger sister who wanted to join the Navy. Anything to keep her engaged, keep her fighting. Wade on the radio every 30 minutes, demanding updates on the storm on the exfil, on any possibility of getting his corpsman to a surgical facility. Kowalski rationing their water, making sure Tessa got fluids even though their own supplies were running critically low. Foster keeping watch despite his burned hands because someone had to maintain security and everyone else was focused on keeping Tessa alive. Sometime during the second night, she'd lost track of time, lost track of everything except the effort of breathing. Wade told her about Morrison. He was a good corpsman, solid, saved 17 lives during his rotation. We respected him. Morrison was better than me, Tessa whispered through cracked lips. No, he was good at his job. You're exceptional at yours. There's a difference. What's the difference? Morrison knew how to heal. You know how to heal and fight and understand when each is needed. You're what the future of this profession should be. She wanted to argue, wanted to say she was just doing what training dictated, but consciousness was slipping away like sand through fingers. The storm broke at hour 46. The radio crackled at 0620 hours on day 3. Alpha 1, this is Medevac 7. We have a bird in the air. Ite, your position in 12 minutes. Ethan, Wade's voice was hoarse from 2 days of stress and shouting at weather controllers. Copy Medevac 7, 1 critical patient, multiple penetrating trauma, severe blood loss. Patient is our corpsman. There was a pause on the other end, then a different voice. Older, the kind of authority that came from 30 years of this work. Alpha 1, this is Chief Garrett. Did you say your corpsman is the casualty? Affirmative. Petty Officer Tessa Brant sustained 11 wounds approximately 48 hours ago. She remained conscious and operational, treating other casualties until hour 42. Another pause, longer this time. Did you say she worked for 42 hours with 11 wounds? Affirmative, Chief. She's been unconscious for approximately 6 hours now. We need that bird. 12 minutes out. The Black Hawk came in low and fast, rotors beating the air into submission. A man jumped out before the skids fully settled. Late 50s, silver hair cut military short, the bearing of someone who'd spent 3 decades keeping people alive in impossible circumstances. Chief Petty Officer Mitchell Garrett, Doc Mitch to 3 generations of SEALs. The senior corpsman they called when situations had progressed beyond difficult into mythological. He knelt beside Tessa, hands already moving through assessment with the speed of vast experience. 11 penetrating wounds. How long has she been like this? 48 hours since initial trauma, Wade said. Conscious and working until 6 hours ago. Doc Mitch's hands stilled, just for a second, then continued their assessment. 48 hours. She worked for 42 of them. Treated 3 other casualties. Applied tourniquets, started IVs, extracted shrapnel, all while bleeding out. Doc Mitch looked up at Wade. Something in his eyes that transcended professional assessment. You boys kept her alive with field expedient care for 2 days. Sullivan spoke up. She taught us how, Chief. Everything we did, we learned from watching her work. Doc Mitch returned his attention to Tessa, started an additional IV line with the practiced efficiency of someone who could do this in complete darkness. Check the tourniquets Sullivan had applied. These tourniquets are textbook perfect. The IV placement is excellent. You did good work here. We had a good teacher, Ellis said quietly. Doc Mitch began preparing Tessa for transport, securing the lines, stabilizing the wounds, the mechanical preparation for moving someone who might not survive the movement. Help me get her on the stretcher. They loaded Tessa with the kind of care usually reserved for unstable explosives. Every movement calculated, every shift in position monitored for changes in vital signs. Doc Mitch climbed into the helicopter beside her, already beginning the work of keeping her alive for the 30-minute flight to Bagram. Wade grabbed his arm before the bird lifted. Chief, she's one of yours. She's the best corpsman I've ever seen. Bring her back. Doc Mitch met his eyes. What she did working that long with those injuries, that's not just good. That's legendary. I'll do everything I can. That's all I can ask. The helicopter lifted, rotors screaming, and climbed into the Afghan sky. Wade stood with his team and watched until it became a speck, then nothing. Kowalski broke the silence first. I told her she was too small for this job. Nobody responded. I was wrong. About everything. Sullivan nodded slowly. We all were. She's not just a corpsman. She's what we should all aspire to be. What's that? Ellis asked. Complete. Medical skills and combat skills integrated so seamlessly you can't tell where one ends and the other begins. Wade looked at each of them. When we get home, we make sure everyone knows what happened here. What she did, how she redefined what a corpsman can be. Yes, sir. The mission was over. The deployment would continue for 3 more months. But something had changed in that team. They'd seen what excellence looked like when it was willing to bleed for the people beside it. They'd learned that the best warriors weren't the ones who only knew how to fight. They were the ones who knew how to heal, and how to choose between them. 2 weeks later, Tessa woke up in a hospital bed in Landstuhl, Germany. The room was white and sterile and smelled like disinfectant instead of gun oil and Afghan dust. Her left arm was in a sling. Both legs were wrapped in bandages. 11 separate wound sites. 11 separate points of pain that announced themselves the moment consciousness fully returned. But she was alive. A nurse noticed she was awake, left quickly, returned with a doctor who checked her vitals and asked the standard questions about pain levels and whether she knew her name and what year it was. She knew everything. An hour later, Wade walked in. He looked older than she remembered. The lines around his eyes had deepened, but he smiled when he saw her awake. Welcome back, Brandt. Sir, her voice was rough from intubation. The team wanted to be here. They're still deployed, but they sensed something. He handed her a small wooden box. Inside was a seal trident patch. Not official issue. The kind teams made for people they considered family. Handcrafted. Personal. On the back, someone had written in permanent marker, both hands Doc, always both. Sullivan's idea, Wade said, but we all agreed. You earned this, not just for the shooting, for everything you are. I'm a corpsman, sir. I don't rate SEAL insignia. You rate this one. You prove that the old categories don't work. You don't choose between healer and warrior. You're both. You always were. Tessa looked at the patch, the eagle anchor, trident, and pistol, the symbol of a brotherhood she'd supported but never thought she'd be part of. There's something else, Wade said. The Navy Cross recommendation went up 3 days ago for actions above and beyond, for saving 3 lives while critically wounded, for maintaining operational effectiveness despite trauma that should have been immediately incapacitating. I was just doing my job. Your job was medical support. What you did transcended every category we have for it. He pulled up a chair, sat down like he planned to stay a while. When you're healed, you have options. Naval Special Warfare Command wants to talk about a new training program, Integrated Combat Medicine. They want you to develop the curriculum. Teach. Share what you've proven, that medical personnel can be combat effective, that the best corpsmen are the ones who understand when to heal and when to fight. Tessa was quiet for a long time. I promised my mother I'd never fight. You kept that promise for 10 years. Then you broke it to save lives. That's not failure, that's growth. She won't see it that way? Maybe not at first, but I called her last week, told her everything. She's proud of you, Brant. Scared, but proud. You called my mother. Someone had to tell her what her daughter did, that you're a hero. I'm not. Yes, you are. And the sooner you accept that, the sooner you can help others become it too. He stood to leave. Rest, heal. We'll talk more when you're stronger. The Navy needs you, Brant. The teams need you. Don't waste this gift. After he left, Tessa held the trident patch and thought about promises. The one she'd made to her mother over her father's grave. The one she'd broken in Afghanistan. Maybe they weren't opposites. Maybe protecting lives was the highest expression of both. 6 months later, Tessa Brant stood in front of 24 students at the Naval Special Warfare Center in Coronado, California. The scars had healed into 11 permanent reminders. She wore them under her uniform like medals she'd never show, but would never forget. The class was diverse. Navy corpsmen, Army medics, Air Force pararescue jumpers, all dedicated to keeping warriors alive. Welcome to Integrated Combat Medicine, she said. This course will teach you that healing and fighting aren't separate skills. They're two parts of the same mission. She walked to a table where medical supplies and weapons sat side by side. You'll learn to transition seamlessly, from tourniquet to rifle, from rifle back to eye of bag. You'll understand that both tools serve the same purpose. A young corpsman raised his hand. But Doc, our job is medical. Isn't combat training mission creep? Tessa met his eyes. Your mission is keeping your team alive. Sometimes that requires medical intervention. Sometimes it requires eliminating the threat trying to kill them. The question isn't whether you should have both capabilities. The question is whether you can afford not to. She picked up a rifle in her right hand, a medical kit in her left. 2 hands, 1 mission. That's what we're here to learn. The course ran for 6 weeks. Every student learned advanced trauma care that went beyond their basic training. Every student qualified on rifle and pistol to 800 meters. Not as well as Tessa, but well enough to save lives in multiple ways. Kowalski served as an assistant instructor. His leg had healed well and he'd volunteered immediately when he'd heard about the program. You changed everything, he told Tessa during a break between classes. Used to think corpsmen were support assets. Now I understand you're force multipliers. We always were. We just articulated it better. Sullivan visited during week 4. He'd been promoted to Master Chief and assigned to a training command. Program's expanding, he said. Command wants to implement this at 6 more bases next year. That's a lot of travel. That's a lot of lives saved. Every corpsman who graduates from here goes back to their team better prepared. That's your legacy. Tessa looked at the students running drills on the range, transitioning from treating simulated casualties to engaging targets, the integration becoming natural through repetition. Legacy, she said quietly. My father left a legacy. I'm still figuring out what mine will be. You're looking at it. 24 students this cycle, hundreds over the next few years, thousands eventually, all of them trained in the skills you proved were essential. I just showed what was possible. That's exactly what legacy is. Wade showed up on graduation day. The 24 students stood in formation while the NSW commander presented certificates. Each one represented 6 weeks of intensive training. Each one represented future lives saved through integrated capabilities. After the ceremony, Wade pulled Tessa aside. Your enlistment's up in 8 months. You thinking about re-upping? She hadn't let herself think about it. I don't know, sir. Think about it. What you've built here is bigger than one deployment, bigger than one team. This could define your career. Or I could go back to regular corpsman duties, serve quietly, like I promised my mother. You could? But would that honor your father's legacy? Or yours? The question sat heavy between them. That evening, Tessa called her mother. The phone rang 4 times. She almost hung up. Tessa. Hi, Mom. Silence. Then, how are you healing? Good. The scars don't hurt anymore. All 11 of them. All 11. Your commander Wade called me again last month. Told me about the teaching program, about the students. I'm sorry I didn't tell you first. Don't be. I'm glad he did. I needed to hear it from someone who understands what you're doing. Tessa's throat tightened. Mom, I know I broke my promise to you. You broke one promise to keep a bigger one. What do you mean? Your father made me promise something before his last deployment. He made me promise that if anything happened to him, I'd make sure you stayed strong, that I wouldn't let fear make you weak. Tessa hadn't known this. When you joined as a corpsman, I thought that was enough. You'd be safe, you'd help people. You'd stay away from combat. I tried. I know you did, but life doesn't always cooperate with our plans. Your father understood that. He knew that strength means being ready for whatever comes. Are you saying you're okay with what I did? I'm saying I'm proud of what you've become. Scared, but proud. You're your father's daughter, and you're my daughter, and you're exactly who you were meant to be. They talked for 2 hours about Afghanistan, about the training program, about the future. When Tessa hung up, something that had been tight in her chest for 6 months finally loosened. 3 months later, she re-enlisted. Her designation changed to Integrated Combat Medicine Specialist, a new rating created specifically for people who'd proven the old categories inadequate. She taught 18 classes that first year, 432 students. Each one left understanding that protection sometimes required destruction, that the best warriors knew when to do which. Her original team completed the course in the second session. Ellis had recovered fully. The scar on his side was barely visible. Foster came through in month 6, his shoulder finally operating at full capacity. Blake in month 8, every one of them taking the course she'd built from principles proven in blood. By year 2, the program was mandatory for all NSW corpsmen. By year 3, the Army had adopted a modified version. By year 5, it was multinational. Allied Special Operations Forces sending their medical personnel to learn from the woman who'd taken 11 wounds and kept working. Tessa Brandt became a name spoken with reverence in certain circles. But when people asked about that day in Afghanistan, she always gave the same answer. I did what the situation required, both parts of my job. 10 years after that day, Wade organized a reunion. The entire team gathered in San Diego. Kowalski now a chief petty officer. Sullivan retired but still teaching. Ellis a seasoned operator with 4 deployments behind him. Foster and Blake both still operational. They met at a restaurant near the base. Civilian clothes, cold beers, the easy friendship of people who'd bled together. Wade raised his glass to Doc Brandt, who taught us that excellence means understanding when to heal and when to fight. They drank. Kowalski spoke. You know what I remember most? What? Tessa asked. Finding out you had 11 holes in you and realizing you'd been working the whole time. That's when I understood what corpsmen really are. Not support, not backup. Essential. Ellis nodded. You saved my life with gauze and again with a rifle. I don't forget that. Sullivan added quietly, none of us do. You changed how we see the profession. Every operator who works with a corpsman now understands they're getting a warrior who heals, not just a medic. The evening continued. Stories and laughter, and the kind of peace that only exists between people who've survived hell as a team. As they were leaving, Wade pulled Tessa aside one last time. Your father would be proud. I think so too. And your mother? She sends care packages to my students now. Tells me she's proud of what I've built. She should be. We all are. They stood in comfortable silence. You know what the real legacy is, Wade said. What? It's not the program, not the students. It's the idea that we don't have to choose, that the best people are the ones who develop all their capabilities and use each when needed. You proved that. You made it real. Tessa looked at the restaurant where her family was waiting. We all proved it. I just happened to be the one bleeding at the time. Wade smiled. That's exactly why it worked. Because you never made it about you. You made it about the mission. He walked back inside, leaving Tessa alone with her thoughts. On her desk at home sat 3 things. Her father's rifle cleaning kit that her mother had sent, the unofficial SEAL Trident patch with both hands written on the back, and a photo from the first graduating class. 24 corpsmen who now understood what she'd learned in Blood and Pain. That healing and fighting weren't opposites. They were partners. 2 hands working toward the same goal, protecting the people beside you, whatever the cost. Tessa Brandt had spent 10 years proving it was possible, and in the process she'd redefined what it meant to be a warrior. Not someone who only destroys, someone who protects by whatever means necessary, someone who heals when they can, fights when they must, and knows the difference. Both hands, always, both hands. That was her father's gift to her, and now it was her gift to everyone who'd follow.